Welcome everyone. I'm Naveed Iftihar. I'm co-founder of atomcamp. This is a pleasure to have all of you and thank you for joining. atomcamp is a data science and AI training platform. What we try to do is we want to train the manpower of Pakistan, the workforce of Pakistan in data science, artificial intelligence and other emerging technologies. अभी जो है वो दुनिया भर में आप सारे लोग ऑब्वियसली काफ़ी सारे उसी फील्ड से ही हैं एंड यू ऑल अंडरस्टैंड दैट देयर इज सो मच हैपनिंग द डेवलपमेंट एंड द वे थिंग्स आर एडवांसिंग इन जनरेटिव एआई. तो उस वजह से एटम कैंप ने जो है वो ये वाला वेबिनार ऑर्गेनाइज किया है. आवर टीम विल आल्सो बी इंटरेक्टिंग विद यू थ्रू चैट. और जो आज के वेबिनार में आपके कोई क्वेश्चन, कमेंट्स, ऑब्जर्वेशंस हों तो आप चैट के ऊपर काइंडली लिख सकेंगे. यू वोंट बी एबल टू टॉक. देयर आर सो मेनी पीपल हु आर ज्वाइनिंग and it won't be possible to give a chance to so many people. So it's better that आप chat के ऊपर अपने questions और observations लिखें. And second जो है वो just इसके अलावा you can visit atomcamp.com and you can also look at some of the other training programs that we are offering. अभी upcoming जो है वो एक workshop भी आ रही है generative AI and LLMs के ऊपर. So before just I start introduction of the trainer, I just want to make, so Dr. Usman has already joined. So today's webinar will be conducted by Dr. Usman Zia. Dr. Usman Zia साहब जो हैं ये assistant professor हैं NUST में. He has done PhD in generative AI और इनका जो काम है वो LLMs पे दोनों fields में रहा है as an academician and as a practitioner as well. So he has been working with the government of Pakistan, with various departments and institutions, helping them build customized solutions और उनके लिए LLM products बनाते रहे हैं और उसके साथ साथ वो NUST में पढ़ा भी रहे थे. Welcome Dr. Usman Zia and thank you for joining. Over to you and you can let us know that probably you'll talk for some time and then we can have more questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Naveed, and thank you, atomcamp and yourself for giving this opportunity. And really grateful to see so many people coming in. So before further ado, as already highlighted by Dr. Naveed, that since everybody is now talking about generative AI, and specifically and AI generally, that it is going to change how we work in coming near future. So we thought that why not to have a sort of a webinar in which we talk about the fundamentals of this technology, because once the technology is in your hands, it's generally very difficult to understand what's happening in the background. And as a business executive, as a professional, it's very important that you understand what technology you are getting your hands into, what technology are you adopting, what are the benefits, what are the challenges, and what are the risks. So all of these are important decisions that you have to take before you roll it out for your enterprise. May that be a small enterprise or medium or very large, these decisions more or less remain the same, though with varying level of importance, varying level of significance. For a small business, risk might not be that high, but for large enterprises, risk might become the game changer or might be the biggest bottleneck in adoption or the way this technology is adopted. So let's start our today's talk. So I'm going to go a bit slightly in depth into what generative AI is, and then I'll briefly cover what can we do with it, what are the risks and challenges. And my whole talk today will be focused or will be a very summarized version of what we are going to see during the workshop that's planned on 10th and 11th of July. So, so let's start now. Okay. So just a brief about myself, although Dr. Naveed has already very kindly introduced. But I'm assistant professor at Science NUST. I'm also PI of JAZ NUST 5G Innovation Lab. Also working as co-PI at AI Research Lab at NUST. My research interests are large language model, NLP, deep learning, ML, generative AI, and generally. Professionally, I'm also working with Government of Pakistan as solution architect, and my expertise on Java, Python, Oracle, service-oriented architecture, identity, access management, and GIS. So, been working on a lot of these technologies in past 15 to 20 years. So, you are seeing some images and some videos on the screen, and there's something common with all of these images. And you can just comment if anyone can. What do you think that it's common with all of these images, if you can guess? Because they are of persons, fruits, mountains, a lemongrass tree, a bear walking in snow, or a girl or lady standing at the top of the mountain. So they are all generated by AI. So the common thing is that these images were generated by the technologies, created by the technologies out of thin air. And this technology, for example, the videos that you're seeing at the bottom are from a recent platform known as Luma. So it's the similar platform that has been launched by OpenAI known as Sora. So it generates videos just by textual prompts. So this technology or this capability was not present with us in this refined form like some 5-6 years back. So what changed in these last 5 years that we are able to create contents that are so realistic, so human-like, so naturally looking, and so naturally sounding as well. So let's go deep down what this technology is. But before we go into the depths of the technology, every new technology comes with its caveat. We take everything or everything, whenever something changes in our surrounding, our first natural reaction is of fear. And this fear started once OpenAI launched ChatGPT. और उससे पहले टैली भी लॉन्च हो चुका था जो कि टेक्स्ट टू इमेज जनरेशन है मिड जर्नी लॉन्च हो चुका था so there are so many platforms that were coming up rapidly within the matters of months. These platforms just swiped across the globe, and the reaction was of slight fear that we are going to lose our jobs. The way of working will change. The workforce skill requirement will change. Your economic growth will transform or will be more dependent upon if you adopt these technologies rather than the way that you had been working in past 2, 3, 4 decades. Right? So there was a sense of apprehension, there was a sense of fear, there was a sense of anxiety that what will happen in coming years, what can we do, or what should we do, and what we cannot do, because these technologies are not, the capability of everyone. They cannot be developed by everyone. So these fears are the drivers of why most of us thought or have been thinking or are thinking to transition our roles in our company, in our jobs, right? So the broad messages that we are getting is that AI will replace 2 to 20% of your jobs. The economic growth, however, it will create will be massive. So these are the positive messages that it will only impact 2 to 20% of jobs. The economic growth will be massive due to this revolution. And the primary role of AI till now, this technology that we have, is of augmentation. So it's going to add on to what we have been doing, not replace us. But the impact at the lower task level will be widespread and profound. Unlike the technologies AI had been bringing in previous 2 to 3 decades. जो पिछले 2 से 3 दिहाइयों के अंदर AI के products आते थे, they were generally focused on specific roles and tasks. For example, आपको अगर इमेज जनरेशन, इमेज रिकग्निशन के अंदर, इमेज क्लासिफिकेशन के अंदर अगर AI ने बहुत ही सुपर एफिशिएंट परफॉर्मेंस दिखाई, so that replaced or augmented the job of, for example, your radiologist, जो आपकी एक्सरेज करते थे, जो आपकी MRIs करते थे. So AI would actually automatically start classifying, and then your professionals at lower level were, impacted by those technologies. But generative AI will have a widespread and profound impact. But then we also need to be careful. If we see so good, that doesn't mean that everything is good or we don't have to do anything, out of the box. We don't have to change, but we have to change. But then most of these views are based on current managers and employees. ये सिर्फ उनके views हैं जो अभी इस वक्त spread हैं market के अंदर. But even most of the managers and employees don't have the full understanding of what all can be done. And then technology ka impact is always underestimated in the long term. So for short term, yes, we are going to give a knee-jerk reaction, but in the long term, technology ka impact becomes very profound. If you see the example of Nokia, जो कि हमारे dumb Symbian phones बनाते थे, that we used to have back in 90s and early 2000, and the whole company was entirely wiped off the face of smartphone industry once Apple introduced their smartphone, and then Samsung and so many other companies. So the smartphone technology had a very long-term impact, which is still going on, right? And even 10% job replacement is very severe. अगर आप एक small या medium size company भी लें, जिसके, for example, 1,000-2,000 employees हैं, so that means replacing 200 people. And 200 people replacement is a massive shift in a medium company. And 50-60% tasks will be impacted, will require staff reskilling. So it's not just replacement of your workforce. It's also the reskilling of your workforce, or the reskilling of people that have joined today, that you have to reskill yourself in coming days and coming months and years to be able to keep up with the technology for the role that you have been performing, right? And as always, pessimism doesn't sell. Agar aap fear create karenge, that doesn't sell much. Generally, people react to pessimism with positive attitude, and they will react with some innovative thoughts, right? So there is opportunity over here for us, that if we reskill, understand the gaps, understand the technology, we can leverage maximum out of this whole ecosystem that is evolving as of now globally. So the impact or the fear was so profound that some of you might have heard that an open letter was written by some giant AI experts that we need to stop. That was written in early 2023, that the AI development needs to stop for 6 months so that we can think how to govern it and how to mitigate the risk. And you can see the name a bit bold over here, might not be visible. For example, you can see Elon Musk over here, who was one of the writers of this letter, signatory of this letter, Yuval Noah, a very well-renowned thought think tank. Then we have co-founder of Skype over here. Then we have Apple team lead of Siri, Tom Gruber. So there are so many well-renowned people who just thought that we should stop generative AI or AI development and first decide on the principle. And this is the level of impact that this technology has. In my understanding, why this apprehension was like so much pronounced by these all AI thought think tanks. So there was a survey conducted back in 2022 when ChatGPT was not officially launched. It was launched in November 2022. So the technology was there. Technology for the ChatGPT had been there for 6, 7 years before 2023. But the survey conducted asked 356 AI experts who were actually domain specific AI experts globally. And the question was that unaided machines will be aided to complete every task better and cheaply than human workers. What do they think? What did they think that how much time will it take? So if you see over here that half of the expert expected that this will be done by at least 2061, so around 40 years. And almost 90% thought that it will only be done by in about 100 years. And 5% said that way beyond that, right? So this was the thought process in 2022 by the AI experts that these tasks cannot be done cheaply and better by machines as compared to human workers in at least you can say safely 40, 50 years down the line. And that entirely changed once GPT was launched, once ChatGPT came. So there is a benchmark, uh, a bit academic over here, but there is a benchmark known as massive multitask language understanding. So this benchmark covers 57 subjects, and this benchmark assesses that how good an algorithm is in performing these tasks. And you can see that it includes subjects like STEM, humanities, social sciences, and so many more. And then it also have traditional areas like mathematics, history, law, ethics. And you can see over here that till 2022, we were just touching 60-70% in performing. And as of now, in 2023 and 2024, we are almost approaching 100% in these tasks, right? So these are the journal tasks. So just a benchmark doesn't mean that all of them can be done with super efficiency, but the models, their performance has been growing massively in past 2 to 3 years, right? And this is the time to understand this technology, not reject this. So AI is going to revolutionize the work, but how does it revolutionize this work, or how will it revolutionize this work? So there are different level of expertise that are
अस्सलाम वालेकुम डॉक्टर उस्मान, आप ऑडिबल नहीं है अभी. I think there might be some internet issues on his side, so let's wait for a minute or so. I think he'll be back. Meanwhile, you guys can discuss your ideas, comments, questions in the chat box.
Apologies for some internet connectivity issues. So let's resume. So there are different levels of how we perform our work. So at the most top level, we have leadership. We want to have an integrative system of thinking that can understand complex designs, that can do personal branding and celebrity identification. And then we need these thought leaderships that that can, give or take some important decisions. Then below them, there is a whole tier that carries out the routine knowledge work, fact-heavy analysis, diagnosis, knowledge work production, computation, right? Below that, there is a creativity intensive, emotional intensive, and unstructured artisan work going on, right? So at every level, there are different expertise that are required. So below this creativity, there is a whole production and structured physical work that is manufacturing something or building something, right? And under this production structured physical work is an unstructured physical work that is actually producing or involved in design of those products, right? So in coming days, these different tiers will be taken over by the computers, depending upon what tasks are being done in that particular tier. So for example, below your executives, your routine, knowledge-based, fact-heavy, analytical, and diagnostic work can be performed very well by these modern algorithms. And your whole tier can be, augmented by this technology. And similarly, once we are production at a structured physical work, machines are very good in performing these tasks. They can leverage their agent-based architectures in carrying out these structured and production works in the physical world. And then they can develop these for the creatively intensive and emotionally intensive works. So there are different tiers that are readily going to be revolutionized by this technology. And in my view, we must focus on these two tiers and how we can leverage these technologies at these two tiers to, accrue maximum benefit out of them. Now we know that there are skills that we need to develop in coming days, right? So what comes first, the tools or the skills? So as of now, let's start jumping into why we need to understand or why we need to learn generative AI. So some of you might follow Impact Radar issued by Gartner. So Gartner issues an Impact Radar of technologies on every year. So in 2024, they released their fresh report. And according to that report, by 2027, 30% of all manufacturers across the globe will start using generative AI. An important thing for you to understand is, points that 80% of all conversational AI offerings will be replaced by generative AI. 90% of material in quarterly reports will be synthetically generated by generative AI. But this is the Impact Radar report of 2024. If you compare this report with 2023, in 2023, the same company says that generative AI will have impact in coming 3 to 6 years. And the very next year, their report says that this is impacting, or this technology is impacting workforce as of today. So this is the massive level of impact that this technology has. And it is disrupting, just as an example, some of you might have seen this, that it took around 3.5 years for Netflix to reach 1 million users, around 2 years for Twitter to reach 1 million users. But ChatGPT had 1 million users in just 5 days. So this is the level of adoption that this technology has. So let's start to study that how this technology works. And we will start by just seeing the basics of what AI is, and then we will see what generative AI is. So artificial intelligence is a whole discipline, and there is a subfield in AI known as machine learning. In machine learning, there are generally two types of machine learning algorithms. Some of them are known as supervised machine learning algorithms. So these supervised machine learning algorithms or unsupervised machine learning algorithm, and then we have supervised machine learning algorithm. The unsupervised machine learning algorithms identify the clusters or the groups in the data based on their features without knowing their labels, right? Whereas in supervised machine learning, we have a labeled data set. For example, we have an images of X-rays in which we have some images labeled as that they have tumor in them and some images without tumor. And we train a machine learning algorithm to identify or learn or classify the images based on the features that are present there, whether an image has a tumor or not. So a deep learning is a further subfield of machine learning that uses artificial neural networks to carry out the tasks of learning, right? And deep learning algorithms are, state of the art as of now in most of our classification and prediction tasks. The whole, the boom of deep learning started back in 2012 when LXNet was launched, which was a deep learning algorithm that performs state of the art in image classification. So it was created by Geoffrey Hinton. Geoffrey Hinton is known as godfather of AI. And he developed a neural network that could classify images into 1,000 classes. And it was able to beat all the existing state-of-the-art machine learning models that had been proposed till date. So 2012 तक जितने भी image classification के models आए थे, LXNet was able to beat those, and by a very big margin. And later, Geoffrey Hinton's company was bought by Google, and Geoffrey Hinton kept working in Google till last year. And if you can guess why he left Google last year, was because he was very worrying, very concerned about the way Google is adopting AI. And he was concerned about the risk of AI. And he left Google because of those. Right? So this is the level of concern that is there. But this deep learning architecture, once launched in 2012, then revolutionized the complete AI domain. It was started to be used in every automation, prediction, classification task. And we saw so many algorithms using deep learning that were able to perform way better than their predecessors that were based on some statistical models. So using deep learning, how do generative models work? So deep learning models ki there are two broad types. One is the discriminative deep learning, जिसकी मैं अभी तक आपसे बातचीत करता रहा हूँ. These models classify or predict based on the label data set. So for example, if I have a customer data, जिसमें कि मेरे पास customers की profiles हैं, and I have a history and I know that which customer did a credit card fraud and which customer did not. And based on those profiles, I can train a deep learning network to discriminate between a user or customer who would do a credit fraud and a customer user who would not do a credit fraud. So these discriminative models run the relationship between the features and the labels. तो ये labels और features के बीच में relationship को learn करते हैं, and based on this learning, they are able to classify unseen data. तो जब हम उनको train कर रहे होते हैं, तो हम उनको label data feed करते हैं. Once the model has been trained, and if we feed it unlabeled data or a new data, it will give us the predicted class of that particular input. Discriminative models have been used in varying fields. For example, we can predict whether someone is at risk of cancer, doesn't have cancer. We cannot predicts accurately as of now, but we can predict whether he has some risk of cancer just by seeing the biometric data of his blood profile, his weight, his age, his height, etc. We can discriminate between X-rays. We can discriminate between transaction histories, whether someone's identity has been stolen or not. So these are all discriminative algorithms that classify or predict a class for a particular input. As compared to discriminative models, the generative models generate new data similar to the data it was trained on. So instead of understanding the relationship between the inputs and the labels to classify the data, जहां पे कि वो उनको different bins के अंदर classify कर रहा है, generative models learn the joint distribution of the data. वो jointly learn करते हैं distribution of data को, and based on this joint distribution, they are able to generate new data or similar data that they had been trained on. So a whole pipeline of a generative AI algorithm would be, or a generative AI model would be, that you would train it on either audio, images, video, or text. And once the model has been trained, you give it some prompt, which is some description that what you want it to do. And based on this trained model and this prompt, the model is able to seamlessly generate either audio, image, video, or text, whatever you want it to do. Right? So these models are trained on large data sets of one modality or multimodality. By modality, I mean that it can be audio, image, video, or text. And they are able to generate output in different modalities. They can generate images, audios, videos, and text, both of them, all of them. So one thing to note over here is that the text over here is not restricted to just natural text. The text can be anything. It can be your stock exchange numbers. It can be your genome sequences. It can be the protein structure. It can be your ECG. It can be the some other numerical numbers or textual numbers that represent something, not necessarily language, and it can generate that as well. Right? So this is a very high level workflow of how a generative AI model would work. Then there are different types of generative AI models, and these types of generative AI model are actually based on the type of input that we feed and the output that we get. For example, if you are feeding it text, it can generate text for you. And for that use case, you are using it for translation, summarization, coding, and question answering. If you are feeding in text and generating input, getting output as an image, so you are using it for image generation. And if you are feeding it text and getting audio, so you are generating narration. And for decision making, agent-based, you can train these models to play games as well. And for example, if your input is an image and you're getting text as an output, so you are training it for image captioning, visual concept question answering, image search, or you can use it for super resolution or image completion, or you can use it for video generation or animation generation. So let's now focus on what large language models are, which is a further subfield of generative AI. So large language model, as the name says, that they are primarily language models, right? The term large has some significance, which we'll see in just a while. So let's see why language is so important. So language is very special, as we know that it's man-made. We create contents daily in our life. We think and communicate using language. And then it is an efficient universal medium for transporting and verifying ideas, right? Someone has question. If you can.
नहीं, सब questions जो हैं वो हमने कहा हुआ है chat पे लिखे हैं. अगर कोई
प्लीज आप
ऐसा
क्या
प्रश्न हुआ तो विल शेयर विद यू।
जी श्योर। तो it's a universal medium of transporting and verifying ideas. So a few years ago, we had different models, different solutions for translation. For example, आप खुद बहुत सारे लोगों ने Google Translate इस्तेमाल किया होगा। क्वेश्चन आंसरिंग के लिए आप डिफरेंट सोल्यूशन यूज करते थे। हम मोस्टली अपनी सर्चेज जो है वो गूगल के ऊपर या रेडिट के ऊपर जाके करते थे। स्टैक ओवरफ्लो, अगर आप डेवलपर हैं तो स्टैक ओवरफ्लो यूज करते थे। क्लासिफिकेशन के लिए हम डिफरेंट एल्गोरिदम यूज करते थे। फॉर एग्जांपल, आपकी जो ईमेल्स हैं, दे ऑटोमेटिकली क्लासिफाई योर ईमेल्स एज स्पैम और नॉट स्पैम, एज सोशल मीडिया और जनरल टॉक। तो ये क्लासिफिकेशन के लिए देयर इज डिफरेंट एल्गोरिदम रनिंग एट द बैकग्राउंड ऑफ एवरी ईमेल प्रोवाइडर। जीमेल के अंदर है, माइक्रोसॉफ्ट के अंदर है। फिर हम प्रिडिक्शन और जनरेशन के लिए कुछ और एल्गोरिदम यूज करते हैं। फॉर एग्जांपल, आपके स्मार्टफोन के अंदर यू आर यूजिंग द कीबोर्ड, सो इट इज अ प्रिडिक्शन एल्गोरिदम, क्योंकि वो आपको सजेस्ट कर रहा होता है नेक्स्ट वर्ड। But we had different solution, different model running in for all these different tasks. हम हर किसी को अलग अलग ट्रेन करते थे। But there is one thing common in all of these use cases. And all of these use cases are actually using language as their one medium. अगर हमने ट्रांसलेट करना है तो वी आर एक्चुअली ट्रांसलेटिंग लैंग्वेज। क्वेश्चन आंसरिंग में वी आर यूजिंग लैंग्वेज। क्लासिफिकेशन इज बेस्ड ऑन द टेक्स्ट, ईमेल के टेक्स्ट के ऊपर है हमारी। प्रिडिक्शन हमारी या जनरेशन जो हमारी है वो भी टेक्स्ट बेस्ड है। तो लैंग्वेज बिकम्स द हब ऑफ ऑल दीज मॉडल्स, वेयर वी आर क्यूरेटिंग अ मॉडल and that particular model is doing that particular task for us. But what is so special about language that if we are able to understand the meaning that some text is communicating, we can perform these tasks. So ये जो हम हर मॉडल जो ट्रेन कर रहे थे डिफरेंट डोमेन के लिए, so this model was actually understanding what is meant by the input that is being fed. So if it is trained to answer question, it will understand the meaning of the question and do that. If it is trained to do translation, it will understand one language and translate into another, and so on. Right? But the meaning of language is relational. It's not, ऐसा नहीं है कि हमारा जो एक लफ्ज का मीनिंग है वो किसी एक ही कॉन्टेक्स्ट के ऊपर डिपेंडेंट है। So for example, आपके ऊपर स्क्रीन पे आपको नजर आ रहे हैं कि there are 4 words: cat, kitten, dog and puppy. So implicitly हमारे माइंड में यही आता है कि कैट और किटन जो हैं वो एक स्पीशीज है, डॉग और पपीज जो हैं ये एक और स्पीशीज है, राइट? बट दिस इज नॉट द ओनली relationship between these 4 images that you see on the screen. If anyone can comment, what is other relationship that you can guess out of these 4 images on the screen, or these 4 words actually? Is there any other information that you can extract? The features that language is communicating to you? Yes, they are all animals. Yes, they are all domestic. They can be domesticated. I am talking about their interrelationship. Exactly. So Shiza has actually nailed it, if I haven't missed the comment. Yes. So 2 of them are adults and 2 of them are babies. And this information was only communicated to us by these words. तो इसका मतलब ये है कि जो मीनिंग ऑफ वर्ड है, जो वर्ड की रिप्रेजेंटेशन है, it does not just create one information. If we have a collection of words, then there are so many relationships that exist between these number of words, and we can leverage this concept to build a solution that can understand what we are trying to say. So once we use the language for computer program, we obviously have to feed them in numbers. So हम language को फिर या words को multiple numerical fields से represent करते हैं. But then once we learn these representations, we actually assign or we actually learn their relationships such that they communicate these concepts as well. So हम जब representations of different words को learn करते हैं, so these representations are able to learn these aspects of each word as well, right? So ये तमाम representations जो हैं, ये इन तमाम concepts को learn करती हैं. And once we are going to talk in depth about how these representations are built during the workshop. तो हम in depth देखेंगे कि ये embeddings बनती कैसे हैं और इन embeddings का मतलब क्या है. Just because of the paucity of the time, I'm not going to go in depth into how embeddings are made. But just understand कि जब हम इन embeddings को extract करते हैं language से, तो हम उस extraction के दौरान ये relationships की basis पे embeddings generate करते हैं, जो words की आपस में relationship है. And by leveraging these relationships, we generate embeddings that communicate all of these concepts numerically to our model. So आप में से काफी सारे लोगों ने एक बहुत अच्छी saying सुनी होगी, which is a man is known by the company he keeps. So this is also true for language as well, that a word is identified by the company it keeps. So अगर मैं आपसे कहूं कि बैंक का जो word है, ये किसको represent करता है? So if I say a river bank, so the image of this word bank is entirely different. And if I say a financial bank, then this image in your mind is entirely different, right? So every word once understood or learned in its contextual reference is actually more relevant for me as compared to just learning or just representing this bank word with some numerical representation. ठीक है, फॉर एग्जाम्पल मैं एक सेंटेंस बोलता हूं कि I crossed the river to reach a bank and I crossed the road to reach a bank. तो इन दोनों अल्फाज में जो बैंक का वर्ड है, जिसमें कि मैंने रिवर बैंक भी नहीं बोला और फाइनेंशियल बैंक भी नहीं बोला, इन दोनों अल्फाज में जस्ट बाय चेंजिंग ऑफ वन वर्ड फ्रॉम रिवर टू रोड, जो वर्ड बैंक है उसका मीनिंग एंटायरली चेंज हो गया. So large language models actually leverage this whole concept that if we are able to represent each word by considering the words surrounding it, we can generate more meaningful representations. And by generating more meaningful representations, we can actually generate more meaningful content, right? So if we understand the meaning and generate representation based on those meaning, we can actually have a model which can perform all these tasks using the same model. So large language models are computationally massive models with many parameters. What are parameters? We are going to study in depth and during the workshop. That performs language tasks like predicting the next word. So the basic concept that you need to understand कि जो हमारे जितने भी large language models के products हैं, ChatGPT, Gemini, Cohere, और आप जिस तरह के इस्तेमाल कर रहे हैं Grok के नाम से, so all of these models are actually predicting just next word. So they are just predicting next word based on whatever you have fed to them, right? And they are meant to mimic real world human behavior when given a text in their input. So there have been many attempts to build large language models in history. ELIZA was the first one. You can even see its demo, even as of today, it's live. Then we had some sequence-to-sequence models that were attempted to build language models. And in 2018, we had a breakthrough of GPT. So 2018 May, we had a breakthrough in language generation in the form of generative pre-trained transformer. And this model actually revolutionized the whole language generation or large language model domain. So the transformer architecture was actually proposed in 2017. If most of you or some of you are in academia or are working in this domain, so you must study the base paper, Attention is All You Need, and which was the basis of this whole architecture that is running across around us. So जो GPT का architecture है, I know थोड़ी सी diagram scary है, but I'll break it down into different blocks so that you understand what's happening into this model. So GPT जो है वो एक decoder only model है. You can see over here, right? So it is a generative model that decodes the input and gives you some output. So it tokenizes the input embeddings. जो आप इसको embeddings या input feed करेंगे, ये उसको tokenize करेगा. ठीक है, tokenized embeddings as an input ले रहा है. Tokenization and embeddings, as I already said, we'll see in depth into the workshop. Then it understands or it learns the probability of how important each token is to the input. So for example, if I have an input of 5 words over here, so this attention head over here, this attention block over here is going to assign a representation to this particular word. And once it will assign a representation or learn a representation for this word, it is going to consider all of these words in the input. तो ये तमाम अल्फाज को कंसिडर करते हुए इसकी रिप्रेजेंटेशन जनरेट करेगा. और इनको कंसिडर करने से मतलब ये है कि it is going to give a higher weight to more relevant word and a lower rate to more irrelevant word to generate representation for this particular word. And this will be done for all of these words. तो ये तमाम के तमाम अल्फाज की रिप्रेजेंटेशन जनरेट करेगा, right, based on their dependency on each and every word. So it will be performed in parallel by all of these, for all of these input words. Once we have learned these representations, we are going to feed them to a neural network to predict the next token. And once it predicts the next token, we get our final prediction as an output, and this prediction is our next word. So अगर मैं आपके interaction जो कि आप अभी chat GPT से करते हैं, so if I map your interaction that you do with chat GPT to this particular model, so आप जब chat GPT को एक question लिख के देते हैं, so you ask a question to chat GPT, for example, what is generative AI? जब आप वो क्वेश्चन जीपीटी को देते हैं तो वो क्वेश्चन के तमाम अल्फाज, व्हाट इज जनरेटिव एआई, दीज 4 वर्ड्स आर फेड इनटू द मॉडल. ठीक है, जब इस मॉडल को फीड किया जाता है तो मॉडल जो है वो, फॉर एग्जांपल, आपकी जो चैट जीपीटी मॉडल है वो आउटपुट कुछ इस तरह की जनरेट करता है कि जनरेटिव एआई इज द सब फील्ड ऑफ डीप लर्निंग और एआई और मशीन लर्निंग. ठीक है, इट स्टार्ट्स विद दिस. सो जब आप ये क्वेश्चन फीड करते हैं तो इन 4 इनपुट वर्ड्स की बेसिस के ऊपर दिस वन आइटरेशन बाय दिस मॉडल इज गोइंग टू प्रिडिक्ट द फर्स्ट वर्ड. तो फॉर एग्जांपल वो प्रिडिक्ट करेगा जनरेटिव एआई का वर्ड. ठीक है, जब उसने पहला वर्ड प्रिडिक्ट कर दिया तो दिस वर्ड विल नाउ बी कंकैटिनेटेड टू योर इनपुट. तो अब आपका जो क्वेश्चन था, व्हाट इज जनरेटिव एआई, क्वेश्चन मार्क, जनरेटिव जो अब तक उसने टोकन जनरेट किया है, एंड इट इज गोइंग टू बी फेड अगेन टू दिस मॉडल. तो वो नेक्स्ट वर्ड जनरेट करेगा. उसके बाद जब सेकंड वर्ड जनरेट कर लेगा तो हम दोबारा से इस मॉडल को फीड करेंगे. And we are going to recursively feed this model again and again till the time we have our complete answer. Right? इसका मतलब ये है कि आपके क्वेश्चन के हर आंसर में ये मॉडल रिकर्सिवली उतनी दफा कॉल हो रहा है. राइट, बार बार कॉल हो रहा है. एंड वन इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग टू नोटिस, कि फॉर एग्जाम्पल आप जीपीटी से चैट करते जा रहे हैं, सो यू आस्क वन क्वेश्चन, इट गिव्स यू एन आंसर, यू आस्क अनदर क्वेश्चन। जब आप नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन करेंगे, सो द इनपुट विल नाउ नॉट जस्ट बी योर करंट क्वेश्चन, इट विल बी योर क्वेश्चन 1 प्लस इस आंसर प्लस question 2. All of these three will be fed simultaneously, and then the model will start generating the output for question 2 one by one. Right? And it goes on for your complete one conversation that you are doing with your ChatGPT or Gemini. And then how much is fed into this model, that depends upon the context length or the input length that each model can take. So for example, for ChatGPT, that is जो आप इसका free version इस्तेमाल करते हैं GPT 3.5. So GPT 3.5 की जो context length है, that is around 32,000 tokens. इसका मतलब है कि वो साइमल्टेनियसली 32,000 टोकन्स इनपुट में लेता है। सो आपकी अगर एक कन्वर्सेशन चैट जीपीटी की इज लेस देन 32,000, तो आपकी पूरी कन्वर्सेशन चैट जीपीटी को इकट्ठी जाएगी टू गेट आंसर फॉर योर करंट क्वेश्चन। एंड यू कैन एक्चुअली सी दिस वर्किंग फॉर योर मॉडल्स कि अगर आपकी कन्वर्सेशन लेंथ रफली 32,000 वर्ड से बढ़ गई है, तो जो क्वेश्चन आपने बहुत पहले 32,000 टोकन्स पहले किया होगा, चैट जीपीटी उसका आपको सही तरह से जवाब या रेलेवेंट जवाब नहीं दे सकेगा उस कन्वर्सेशन से, अपनी नॉलेज से जरूर दे देगा। सो दिस इज जस्ट हाउ these language models at a very basic level are working. The transformer architecture is the basis, but this transformer architecture is just the foundation of these language models. Training them is actually very more involved and very more cumbersome. So हम करते क्या हैं? To train these models, we don't actually need training data or label data anymore. So what we do is we get a chunk of internet text, right? So for example, ये जो आपके पास स्क्रीन के ऊपर नंबर्स नजर आ रहे हैं, these are the numbers for Llama 2 70 billion model that has been trained by Meta. Llama 3 जो है वो आपके WhatsApp में आपको अवेलेबल है, Instagram WhatsApp के अंदर जो इंटीग्रेटेड है Llama 3। ये Llama 2 जो है उसका प्रीडिसेसर था, that came out last year. So what, for example, Facebook did was they collected this internet data of around 10 billions of text. इस 10 बिलियन टेक्स्ट को उन्होंने प्री प्रोसेस किया, डीडुप्लीकेट किया, उसके अंदर से जो गार्बेज है वो सारा का सारा रिमूव किया, एंड देन दे ट्रेन्ड देयर जीपीटी मॉडल on 6,000 GPU cluster for 12 days, which roughly costed them around $2 million. And then their Llama 270 billion model was created. Initially, this model is just a chat completion model or a text completion model, जिसका मतलब ये है कि ये जो मॉडल है ये सिर्फ टेक्स्ट कंप्लीट कर सकता है। ये सिर्फ टेक्स्ट कंप्लीट क्यों कर सकता है और ये सवाल जवाब क्यों नहीं दे सकता? वो इसलिए कि जब आप इंटरनेट से टेक्स्ट उठा के लेके आते हैं तो इंटरनेट के ऊपर क्वेश्चन आंसर्स नहीं पड़े होते। हमारे पास आर्टिकल्स पड़े हुए हैं, बुक्स पड़ी हुई हैं, ब्लॉग्स हैं, हमारे पास ट्वीट्स हैं, बहुत कंटेंट हमारे पास नेट पे जो पब्लिकली अवेलेबल है, लेकिन उसके अंदर हर तरफ क्वेश्चन आंसर नहीं लिखे होते, तो आर्टिकल्स हैं, तो रनिंग टेक्स्ट है। तो जब आप एक बेस मॉडल ट्रेन करते हैं तो इट इज जस्ट ट्रेन टू कंप्लीट सेंटेंस, जिसका मतलब यह है कि अगर आप उसे प्रॉम्प्ट देंगे कि देयर वाज अ बॉय हु यूज्ड टू लिव इन अ विलेज एंड डोंट राइट एनीथिंग बियॉन्ड दैट, सो दिस मॉडल which is trained on this so much data will try to complete this story. So you will start writing there was a boy who lived in a village and his father used to work as a farmer and so on, right? So it's just a model that is not question answering model, it is just your completion model कि वो आपके टेक्स्ट को जनरेट करता जा रहा है, जो लाइन आप देंगे उसको कंप्लीट करता जाएगा for as long as the length that you want it to, right? Then we train our assistant. So there is a next step in which we generate or we create question answer or instruction data set for these language models. क्वेश्चन आंसर और इंस्ट्रक्शन डेटा सेट जो हैं वो इन मॉडल्स के लिए तैयार किए जाते हैं बाय written by people. तो हम initially, although this task is now being automated as well, but initially when OpenAI started their work, so they developed an instruction data set which they have not publicly released. But you can see, अगर आप में से कोई इस पे काम करना चाहता है तो for example a very good instruction data set is Alpaca. Stanford University का developed है. So it has, many of them have also made their data sets available publicly, but OpenAI still hasn't. But what they do is they develop instructions for the model. तो हम अब मॉडल को ट्रेन क्या कर रहे हैं? मॉडल को कह रहे हैं कि दिस इज द इनपुट विच इज अ क्वेश्चन एंड दिस इज आवर आउटपुट दैट वी आर एक्सपेक्टिंग, एंड वी ट्रेन आवर मॉडल फॉर दीज क्वेश्चन आंसर पेयर्स. And then once we train on hundreds and thousands of conversations, so that it becomes your chat GPT that you use in your mobile devices. So as I have already explained that our stage 1 is our pre-training. Hence you hear words so much जो खास तौर पे अगर जनरेटिव एआई से इस पे काम कर रहे हैं तो आपको लफ्ज सुना होगा प्री ट्रेन्ड लैंग्वेज मॉडल. सो जब आप एक मेयरली टेक्स्ट के ऊपर उसे ट्रेन करते हैं तो दैट्स अ प्री ट्रेन्ड लैंग्वेज मॉडल. देन यू फाइन ट्यून इट ऑन योर इंस्ट्रक्शन डेटा सेट सो दैट योर मॉडल नाउ एक्ट्स एज एन असिस्टेंट मॉडल, जो कि आपको आपके सवालों के जवाब आपको दे सकता है, ना कि सिर्फ आपकी टेक्स्ट को कंप्लीट करने में मदद देगा. ठीक है, तो इट बिकम्स एन इंस्ट्रक्शनल और an assistant for you which can answer your questions. But then the important question is why it is important, why is it possible now? ये अभी हम क्यों कर पाए हैं और हमने आज से ये फॉर एग्जांपल 10 साल पहले क्यों नहीं कर लिया था? क्योंकि 10 साल पहले भी जनरेटिव मॉडल किसी न किसी फॉर्म में मौजूद जरूर थे, राइट? So it is possible. One of the reason is that now we have so much large digitized data set that we can leverage to train these models. So digitized data set का मतलब ये है कि हमारे पास इंटरनेट के ऊपर there is so much text available and it is freely available, जो कि इससे पहले मुमकिन नहीं था. Back in 90s you have a very limited footprint of internet, you have very limited publicly available data sets. ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस के अपने पास तो शायद फिर भी कंप्यूटर्स के अंदर पड़ा हो डेटा सेट, बट पब्लिकली उसको ट्रेन करने के लिए इतना मैसिव डेटा सेट जो कि ट्रिलियंस ऑफ टोकन्स हो, जो कि टेराबाइट्स ऑफ डेटा हो, वाज नॉट अवेलेबल. देन वी हैव अ मैसिव कंप्यूटेशनल पावर एज ऑफ नाउ, राइट, जो कि पहले थोड़ी सी हमें चैलेंज था. जस्ट टू गिव यू एन एग्जांपल के जो इमेज नेट की मैंने अभी आपको थोड़ी देर पहले मिसाल दी थी, जहां से डीप लर्निंग actually kicked off. So ImageNet का model was trained on a GeForce GTX 580 GPU और इसकी computational power थी 1.6 teraflops. ठीक है, what are teraflops? We'll see during the workshop again. But just for a number to remember, the GPU which was used to train an ImageNet state-of-the-art image classification model, उसकी capability was 1.6 teraflops. And it used to cost around $500 at that time. जिस GPU के ऊपर चैट GPT ट्रेन हुआ है, उसकी capability of a single GPU is around 5 teraflops, 5 petaflops. So it's a huge capability in just one single GPU, and that one single GPU costs around $2 lakh. तो जैसे मैंने आपको मेंशन किया कि फेसबुक का जो लामा मॉडल है, इट वाज ट्रेन्ड ऑन अ क्लस्टर ऑफ 6000 GPUs. So imagine 6005 petaflop GPU compute that is available to us today for training these models. Just as a comparison, human brain की जो estimated capability है, that is 1 petaflop, where this single GPU has 5 petaflop of computational power in it, right? So this is the amount of massive computation that is available to us as of today. And then we have some innovative deep learning model, जिस तरह से transformer architecture मैंने already आपको explain कर दिया, GANs for image generation. And then we have a reinforcement learning whole paradigm, which we are going to go in depth because reinforcement learning is a very relevant field for generative AI to train our model. Right? So why should I care now? Why is it so important for me? Why? Because these models are now becoming very accurate and effective. They can give you pertinent answers right at your fingertips. And they are now being used or can be used for use cases that were not feasible a few years ago. कुछ ऐसे use cases हैं जो कि हम सोच भी नहीं सकते थे कुछ साल पहले कि वो possible होंगे using the machine learning or AI, which are possible as of now. The other most important thing, and I think the second point is actually much more important compared to the first point, and that is the availability of these tools. आज से पहले तक जितने AI टूल्स आपके पास होते थे वो बड़े ही लिमिटेड स्कोप के और बड़े ही स्पेसिफिक डोमेन्स के होते थे. अगर कोई इमेज क्लासिफिकेशन का मॉडल है तो वो हॉस्पिटल के अंदर किसी एक एक्सरे मशीन के अंदर चल रहा होगा और उसी के यूजर या उसका जो टेक्नीशियन है या उसका जो ऑपरेटर है, he would access that. Nobody else would have any access to that. इसी तरह से अगर कोई रिकमेंडर सिस्टम चल रहा है तो वो YouTube के पास ही चल रहा है. अगर कोई क्रेडिट फ्रॉड डिटेक्शन है तो वो बड़ा स्ट्रिक्टली रिस्ट्रिक्टेड है फाइनेंशियल डोमेन के अंदर. जबकि चैट जीपीटी या जनरेटिव एआई की टेक्नोलॉजीज आर नाउ इन आवर मोबाइल फोन्स एंड इन आवर ऑन आवर डेस्कटॉप पीसीज. So they are so widely available that everybody is being impacted because of them. It's not just how good they are, it's just how easily they are accessible, right? And once, of course, they require high GPU compute, but then this GPU compute is now available on cloud so easily that we can leverage these technologies with us. Just to give you an idea of the financial impact that generative AI had recently. So this I took yesterday from a study that in just past 1 year, new generative AI cases have grown by 15 to 40% economic impact. Almost 15 to 40% economic impact hai in generative AI cases ka. And productivity has increased by 35 to 70%. And another metric is that private investment in generative AI was just alone for 2023 was larger than the last 4 years combined. So it was around 25 billion US dollars in just 2023. As you can see on the slide that on the top chart over here, last 4 years की combined जो है वो इतनी नहीं है जितनी कि सिर्फ last year की है. And newly found generative AI companies in just last year were around 100. And when I say generative AI companies, I don't mean a company that is calling ChatGPT through API and using that. Generative AI company से मुराद मेरी वो company है which is building a generative AI solution using some foundation model. And there were hundred almost companies just launched last year working on that. So this is a massive growth, massive opportunity. So there are so many models available to us. Some are usable across platform. जिस तरह से ChatGPT है, Gemini है, U है, Grammarly अगर आप में से कुछ use कर रहे होंगे, Writer के नाम से है, Cohere, one of the major player. Then there are some function specific. GitHub Copilot might be used by so many developers even online today. Then we have ADA के नाम से, Jasper के नाम से, very well renowned, Synthesia के नाम से. So these are some domain specific models, and then this list is going and growing. So how can you bring LLM to your company? Since this talk and the workshop will be also focused कि आप company में इसको adopt कैसे कर सकते. So first you need to understand or determine कि आपकी company के अंदर वो कौन सा use case है which can leverage or which needs generative AI. So if you find some use case, then you have to decide कि आपने किस path पे जाना है. Because generative AI के, as with most of the software development, you can go with open source or you can go with proprietary. right? Then you have to choose your model. कि आपने open source model choose करना है या proprietary model use करना है. And then your next decision would be whether you are going to adapt your way of working to the model that is being available, that has been made available to you, or whatever decision you made for open source or proprietary, or you are going to improve that model's performance and tailor it to your specific need, right? So using these three steps, there are actually three broad categories of generative AI adoption. A few of them are the takers. They integrate commercial off-the-shelf solutions because maximum of whatever they want to do is already available, that off-the-shelf solution. So it entails very less capital expenditure at their end, right? आपको capex या आपका capital expenditure which you have to invest right at the start would be very less, but you will have very less customization option available to you. Then the next are the shapers, which augment existing generative AI models. They tailor them or they augment them with some specific sectorial or business case needs by leveraging proprietary data insights. जबकि जो built in insights हैं वो नहीं कोई leverage कर रहे हैं, but कुछ tailor कर रहे हैं उसकी interface को या उससे interaction को. So it requires some capital expenditure, but then not as much as creating your own, but then requires some effort to tailor this. And then there are makers जो कि generative AI products बना रहे हैं using the new foundation models being or training them from start. जिस तरह कि आपके पास product Perplexity है. So if somebody is using Perplexity, a new product that was launched last year by MIT and Stanford graduates, and this project is actually aiming to replace your Google search or the way you search internet into a conversational interaction. So if you see the business value, so there are 4 C's that generative AI can impact your business. One C is concision. That means that you can build your virtual experts that can summarize these texts for you, interpret these texts, transcribe these texts, enabling querying and citation of these resources. Then you can have a creative content domain in which you can generate text, images, write documents, create communications, generate visual to accelerate R&D processes. There's so many applications of creative contents. Then coding and software. So जितनी भी आपकी not only software development companies, जितनी भी enterprises हैं जिनके अंदर in-house development हो रही है, there are so many organizations who actually want to have their own teams rather than taking software from the outside. So they have their own co-pilots available now, which are actually boosting their productivity. And then we have customer engagements. कि आपने customer से कैसे engage करना है, आपने उनको outreach कैसे करना है, आपने उनको messaging कैसे करनी है. So all of these domains have a massive business value if generative AI is involved. Or when I'm talking about generative AI, these all are actually primarily mostly focused on large language models, right? So if you want to map your use cases to your enterprises, so you have to understand the complexity of the task and the value that you're getting. Every business decision is actually driven by the cost. कि आपको उसका cost कितना है और आपको उसका return कितना मिलेगा. How complex it is to do in terms of manpower, in terms of complexity of doing that task, in terms of cost, and how beneficial it is for you in terms of your ROI, in terms of your day-to-day operations. Right? So these business decisions are based on the value that you get by implementing these language models by embedding these language models into your businesses. As always said, that language models are used for content generation, question answers, virtual assistants, and so many other domains that you can leverage these. Now, which flavor of language model is perfect for you? So we saw a few slides back that you can go for open source or you can go for proprietary language models. In order to guide that decision, you have to focus on 4 important questions. One question is privacy of your data. For example, if you are working in a healthcare sector, or if you are a product developer, और आप प्रोडक्ट्स बनाते हैं यूजिंग जनरेटिव एआई, और आप प्रोडक्ट बना रहे हैं फॉर एग्जांपल यूरोपियन और यूएस के कस्टमर्स के लिए, और उनका जो डोमेन है वो हेल्थ केयर है, सो प्राइवेसी बिकम्स ऑफ प्राइम इंपॉर्टेंस फॉर यू. तो इज इट पॉसिबल कि आपने कस्टमर या आपने पेशेंट्स की क्लिनिकल नोट्स को कन्वर्ट करना है स्ट्रक्चर डेटा के अंदर, just transcribing the discussion between the doctor and the patient, and you can throw that whole text to a proprietary language model on the cloud and get that structured output. तो ये मैं उसकी यूज केस की बात कर रहा हूँ कि फॉर एग्जांपल देयर आर कंपनीज जो कि सिर्फ डॉक्टर और पेशेंट की कन्वर्सेशंस को रिकॉर्ड कर रही हैं, उस रिकॉर्डिंग को एक जनरेटिव एआई मॉडल को दे रही हैं जो कि उसकी ट्रांसक्रिप्शन जनरेट कर रहा है. वो ट्रांसक्रिप्शन एक लार्ज लैंग्वेज मॉडल को दे रही हैं जो कि उसकी स्ट्रक्चर्ड आउटपुट जनरेट कर रहा है. स्ट्रक्चर्ड का मतलब है कि वो डॉक्टर का नाम, पेशेंट का नाम, पेशेंट के वाइटल्स, पेशेंट की डिजीज, डॉक्टर की मेडिसिन की रिकमेंडेशंस, वो सारी इंफॉर्मेशन एक्सट्रैक्ट करके एक इलेक्ट्रॉनिक हेल्थ रिकॉर्ड सिस्टम के अंदर पुश कर रहा है. तो कंप्लीट चेन ऑटोमेटेड. वंस द पेशेंट लीव्स, all of the notes are directly fed into your electronic health record just by using generative AI. So these are very much being done by so many companies now. But then the decision point is कि क्या आप यह सारा data proprietary online cloud-based solutions को throw कर सकते हैं या नहीं कर सकते. You might be violating your patient's privacy. उसकी information की privacy को आप hit कर रहे हैं. And it's not just about your customer privacy. आपकी अपनी प्राइवेसी है. आप में से कुछ लोगों ने आज से 1.5-2 साल पहले एक न्यूज सुनी होगी कि सैमसंग के डेवलपर्स जो उनकी चिप डिजाइनिंग के अंदर काम करते हैं, so they were using an online platform to optimize their chip design code, and their whole chip design code was actually copied and pasted to that particular cloud platform to optimize that. And that now once you are using, for example, अगर आप चैट जीपीटी 3.5 का फ्री वर्जन यूज कर रहे हैं, so चैट जीपीटी ओपन एआई जो कन्वर्सेशन है आपकी उसको यूज कर सकते हैं मॉडल की ट्रेनिंग के लिए. तो जो बातें आपने चैट जीपीटी को पुश की हैं वो बातें कल रेप्लिकेट भी हो सकती हैं किसी और के जवाब के अंदर. एंड द सैमसंग कंपनीज चिप डिजाइन वाज एक्चुअली लीक्ड थ्रू समवन एल्सेस चैट, कि उन्होंने कोई ऐसा क्वेश्चन किया जिसके जवाब में उनको सैमसंग की चिप डिजाइन का कोड जो है वो प्रोड्यूस कर दिया गया था by that particular cloud provider. So privacy is one of the biggest concerns. Then comes the quality. Obviously, as you might all know, and state of the art is held as of now in language model by OpenAI. So क्या आपका use case high quality of output is must for that, or you can take a hit of quality and you can go for open source और आप उसको on premises deploy कर सकते. Then comes the cost. आप OpenAI पे जाते हैं या आप Gemini के ऊपर जाते हैं या आप Cohere के ऊपर जाते हैं, जो भी आप cloud based solution पे जाते हैं, there is cost attached to it. You have to pay per token. जितनी दफा आप क्वेश्चन भेजेंगे उसके साथ जितना भी टेक्स्ट आ रहा है या जो भी इंफॉर्मेशन जा रही है, you are paying for that. जो चीज आपको वापस जनरेट होके आ रही है, you are paying for that as well. So your payment is two ways. The information you send to cloud provider and the information you get from them, both are metered. So are you comfortable with paying on monthly or annually basis, or are you comfortable in massively investing once, कि आप अपने ही पास एक ओपन सोर्स मॉडल को होस्ट कर लें और फिर उसको सस्टेन करते रहें, so you are just managing or sustaining that particular model, right? Then the last or one of the last but not the least is latency. How much latency can you afford in your model? So for example, आपके पास जो cloud based solutions हैं, they have low latency. If you are working on a web protocol, HTTP के ऊपर अगर आपकी ही सारी communication है, तो they have a sufficiently low latency because they have massive compute available to them. But अगर आप ओपन सोर्स पे जाते हैं और आप अपने पास होस्ट करते हैं तो आपके पास क्योंकि शायद उतनी कंप्यूटेशनल पावर ना हो, तो यू माइट गेट लेटेंसी इन दैट. So you have a decision point over here, and this decision point is based on the use case you are trying to implement. For example, अगर आपने content generation या tweet ही generate करनी है, so latency is not that big an issue for you. आप कुछ millisecond की latency रख सकते हैं. लेकिन अगर आप एक product design कर रहे हैं for stock exchange, जो रियल टाइम डेटा को एनालाइज करके आपके यूजर को इंफॉर्मेशन या आपके यूजर्स को टिप्स दे रही है, व्हाट टू बाय व्हाट टू सेल, और उसके अंदर लेटेंसी है और आपको जवाब ही जो है वो सेकंड्स में और मिनट्स में मिल रहा है, तो स्टॉक एक्सचेंज तो माइक्रो सेकंड्स और मिली सेकंड्स के अंदर चेंज हो जाती है. तो देयर सो मेनी बाइंग सेलिंग गोइंग ऑन दैट इट चेंजेस ऑन द फ्लाई. So you need to decide that how much latency you can afford in your particular use cases. Then there are level of different adoptions. So you can start, if you have a simpler use case, you can use a pre-built language model. जिस तरह से आपके पास ChatGPT available है. So for example, a friend of mine, he is running a company, so he wanted to get hire some individuals. So he got the CVs, उसने CV सारी की सारी वहां से कॉल की, सारे लोगों ने उसको CV भेज दी. तो he had 10-20 CVs and he was supposed to hire 3 out of them. So what he did was he bought ChatGPT's paid version. वो सारी की सारी CVs उसने लोड की, ChatGPT को दी, GPT-4 को, 4o को, और asked them to profile them. जॉब डिस्क्रिप्शन दी और उनसे कहा कि इन जॉब डिस्क्रिप्शन से मुझे इनके मैट्रिक्स बना के दो. उन मैट्रिक्स के साथ उन सीवीज को मैप करा के उसने कहा कि मुझे इनकी रैंकिंग करके दो. सो ऑल ऑफ दिस ही इज डूइंग हिमसेल्फ बाय जस्ट फीडिंग दोज 20 CVs to his GPT account. So this is the basic level of what you can do with your language model. Then comes a slightly complex in which you hire someone or you learn how to do prompt engineering and you develop your own specific prompts in which you also guide language model what to do, and you also tell it how to generate and in what format you are expecting the outputs. So it's a slightly complex thing to do as compared to just using plain natural language chat interface, because you need to have some software, you need to get developed a software that would talk to this language model through API and get your desired results. But then it will give you your domain specific or your desired output in the format that you want to do. And during the workshop, we are going to go deep into how to do prompt engineering using common APIs. Now, if this prompt engineering is not giving you your best answer, then you can add knowledge base to your model. That means that you can augment your LLM with a whole storage of your information. तो आप अपने पूरे डोमेन स्पेसिफिक इंफॉर्मेशन को एक वेक्टर स्टोर, एक डेटा बेस के अंदर रख सकते हैं और लैंग्वेज मॉडल को उससे कनेक्ट कर सकते हैं. तो whenever LLM will answer back your query, it will first retrieve relevant information from your data set and then respond back to you. It's the same thing as LLM does when you feed a PDF to it. जिस तरह से आप ChatGPT को एक PDF फीड करते हैं और वो आपको PDF से जवाब दे रहा होता है. So that's the answer is going or coming from just one single document. But in this particular case, you are actually storing complete enterprise data in a data store, and your all queries are answered based on whatever information is available in that data store. So during the workshop, we are also going to see how a whole RAG pipeline works. और उसके लिए कौन से frameworks, LangChain की तरह के Langsmith के available हैं that can help you out in implementing those pipelines. And the most complex thing, if none of these 3 options are good for you and you still want to go with a more complex, more tailored, very private, very customized solution, then you can fine-tune your own language model. And by fine-tuning, I do not mean that you are building a language model from scratch. What I mean to say is कि आप, for example, Meta का Llama 3 डाउनलोड कर सकते हैं और अपने डेटा सेट के ऊपर उसको फाइन ट्यून कर सकते हैं so that now this model understands your domain specific data, and then you can build your interfaces using that particular model. So during the workshop, we are going to fine tune a language model on the cloud, ताकि हम देख सकें कि आप फाइन ट्यूनिंग के लिए कौन सी पाइपलाइन इस्तेमाल कर सकते हैं, कौन सी आपके पास लाइब्रेरीज अवेलेबल हैं, प्लेटफॉर्म अवेलेबल हैं टू फाइन ट्यून, हाउ मच डज इट रिक्वायर टू फाइन ट्यून अ बिग मॉडल, हाउ बिग अ मॉडल इज गुड फिट फॉर यू. लैंग्वेज मॉडल्स के साइजेस आपने की नजर से गुजरा होगा कि जो GPT-4o है, इट हैज 1 ट्रिलियन पैरामीटर्स, तो 1 ट्रिलियन पैरामीटर का मॉडल है. Llama 3 is 70 billion parameters. Microsoft का जो मॉडल है, it has variants of 2, 4 and 9 billion parameters. Google Gemini के जो variants हैं वो 9, 23 and so on, कुछ billion parameters के मॉडल. So there are so many models available, proprietary and open source both. So which model to pick, how to pick that model, how to fine tune, how to host them. So we are going to go a bit in depth that how this whole pipeline is developed to achieve that state of the art. And finally, once we have understood what this technology is, very briefly, what it can do for you, how you can implement this, then there are also risks and challenges. There are so many legal issues. There are so many privacy challenges, security challenges, intellectual property challenges once you are building or using these solutions. Then there are so many ethical biases or misinformation. For example, since a language model has been trained on the data that is publicly available on the internet, so all the biases that are implicitly available in the internet, language model has learned those as well. So for example, आज से साल पहले अगर आप GPT से पूछते कि give you a profile of a candidate for a job of a nurse in a hospital, तो चैट जीपीटी जो आपको प्रोफाइल जनरेट करके देगा वो एक फीमेल कैंडिडेट का होगा, जबकि वी नो दैट नर्सेज आर नॉट जस्ट फीमेल, तो मेल भी हो सकती है. लेकिन ये एक हमारा नेचुरल बायस है, हमारी सोसाइटी का बायस है कि हम भी वी आर ऑल्सो बायस कि जब भी हमें नर्स का वर्ड माइंड में आता है तो हमारे माइंड में एक फिगर फीमेल की आती है, जो कि इट्स अ बायस टुवर्ड्स दैट जेंडर. That job can be done by equally good by both males and females, right? So ये natural bias है जो कि इंटरनेट के अंदर अवेलेबल है उस टेक्स्ट के अंदर, और वही bias ट्रांसलेट हो रहा है आपकी लैंग्वेज मॉडल के अंदर. एंड देन मिस इन्फॉर्मेशन. सो whatever was being thrown to internet, उसके अंदर जो कुछ इंफॉर्मेशन करेक्ट नहीं भी है, so you are dependent upon how good OpenAI was in filtering that information, whether they removed all that misinformation or wrong information from the text they used to train the model or not, right? So there are these issues. Then there are societal and environmental issues, impact on workforce, massive impact on environment. These GPUs do so much carbon emission, and with thousands of GPUs running in cluster, the environmental impact is definitely very huge. For example, a data center being run by Microsoft in Seattle is actually consuming an electricity equivalent to the whole town of a US. A normal town USA का जितनी बिजली कंज्यूम करता है माइक्रोसॉफ्ट का एक डेटा सेंटर उतनी बिजली कंज्यूम कर रहा है डेली बेसिस के ऊपर, राइट? सो देयर इज सो मच मैसिव इम्पैक्ट. और हम इन प्राइवेसी और बायसेस के ऊपर, मिस इन्फॉर्मेशन और सिक्योरिटी चैलेंजेस के ऊपर वी विल गो इन डेप्थ इनटू द वर्कशॉप कि लैंग्वेज मॉडल्स के अंदर आपके पास थ्रेट्स हैं क्या, प्राइवेसी कंसर्न्स हैं क्या, जेल ब्रेक कैसे होता है, आप LLM जो है वो इंफॉर्मेशन लीक कैसे कर देता है. सो वी आर also going to see a touch upon these concepts during the workshop coming on 10th. So with this, I come to the end of today's talk. So in this short span of time, I have tried to start from a broad information about generative AI, and then some touch of technology, not in depth in going deep, because then it becomes technically very confusing and challenging to cover in 90 minutes. So I will just stop now, and if you have any questions, we have around 30 minutes to answer this question. I will hand over to the moderator right now. अगर आप कोई questions की तरफ, if you have prepared a list, so we can answer those one by one.
Yes, almost most of the questions were answered by Sir Abdul Rafi in the chat. And if anyone has any further questions that you want to ask Sir Usman, then please let us know.
So we have one hand raised.
Yes, whoever this is, please write the question in the
Financial
chat.
engineering के नाम से जो हैं, if you want to ask question.
Dr. Usman, we've been asking people to write questions in chat, and then Samin will be sharing those questions with you.
जी वो तो I've been told कि कुछ questions उन्होंने answer कर दिए हैं. But let's see if someone still has any question, they can ask. Please go ahead. Anyone who has any question.
People who have raised their hands, please write the questions in the chat box. So we have a question.
मैं एक question मैं पहले answer कर दूं. मैं पहले just reinforcement learning का question किसी ने किया हुआ था कि reinforcement learning कैसे use होती है to train language model. So reinforcement learning is part of training pipeline, in which what we do is कि हम language model से कहते हैं कि वो एक question का output generate करे. उसके बाद once initially what was done was कि उन question के answers को rate किया जाता था by the humans. तो OpenAI made a team of 40 individuals sit. उन सबको उन्होंने एक large data question bank दिया. उनसे कहा कि चैट जीपीटी से ये question करो. चैट जीपीटी उनका आंसर देता था repeatedly. Randomly question throw किए जाते थे, और वो human being जो है वो rank करता था, for example 0 से लेके 1 से लेके 10 तक, कि ये चैट जीपीटी ने कितना आंसर अच्छा दिया है. इस रैंकिंग को इस्तेमाल करके हम लैंग्वेज मॉडल को दोबारा से फाइन ट्यून करते हैं, ताकि हम उसको डायरेक्ट कर सकें कि वो हमें अच्छे आंसर जनरेट करके दे सके. फॉर एग्जांपल, एक छोटी सी मिसाल एट द कॉस्ट ऑफ योर टाइम. आज से 1.5 साल पहले चैट जीपीटी से एक क्वेश्चन किया गया कि आई एम टोटली नॉट बायस्ड टुवर्ड्स वुमेन राइट नाउ, जो मैं मिसाल दे रहा हूँ जस्ट फॉर लाइटर पार्ट. सो चैट जीपीटी से पूछा गया व्हाट इज 2 + 2. तो चैट जीपीटी सेड इट्स 4. So the user said, but my wife said it's 5. So ChatGPT said, oh, I'm sorry, your wife is right. It is actually 5. So this happened with ChatGPT 1.5 years ago. So once this was observed by OpenAI, that there is a bias in the model, so they then process it through a reinforcement learning cycle, जिसमें उसको बताया गया कि don't give biased output. तो उसकी biased outputs को low rank किया गया, unbiased को high rank किया गया. If you ask now, तो वो आपको बेशक आप जितना मर्जी कह लें कि बेगम मेरी ठीक कहती है, वो कहेगा नहीं, 2 + 2 4 होता है. So जी, any other question?
जी, we have a question from Mr. Tariq. He LLM and will have the search engines.
Sorry, I थोड़ी सी break कर गई.
Yeah, what impact LLM will have on the search engines?
जी, LLM का impact search engine पे it's still debatable. I would refer you to listen to the talk by Perplexity CEO with Lex Fridman. Podcast है उनकी. Perplexity is one of the organization जो कि LLM को use कर रही है to search the internet. Problem ये है कि as of now, till the capability we have now, language models जो है वो आपको टू द सोर्स तो ले जाते हैं, ठीक है, लेकिन हम अकस्टम्ड हैं बहुत सारी सर्चेस के अंदर हमारी जो सर्च होती है बड़ी नैरो होती है. जहां पे कि आपने नॉलेज सर्च करनी है, यस एलएलएम वुड बी वेरी गुड, लेकिन जहां पे आपने इंफॉर्मेशन सर्च करनी है वहां पे प्रॉब्ली गूगल इज स्टिल गोइंग टू एक्सेल, क्योंकि वो आपको इंफॉर्मेशन तक बड़ा ही क्विकली ले जाता है. उनका एल्गोरिदम व्हिच इज बेस्ड ऑन पेज रैंक बट मच इवॉल्व्ड. Once PageRank was proposed 20 years back, उसके बाद बहुत इवॉल्व कर गया है. तो वो एल्गोरिदम आपको इंफॉर्मेशन तक बड़ा क्विकली ले जाता है. लैंग्वेज मॉडल जो है वो आपको नॉलेज तक बड़ा क्विकली ले जाता है. सो इट्स it's a play going around how to get a balance between these two. And we might see some evolution in which we might be able to get to information search using LLMs as well quickly.
We have another question from Mr. Malik Hamid. He has asked, how has RAGs with LLM pipeline can help the model to perform better?
So RAGs जो है हामिद साहब, रिट्रीवल ऑगमेंटेड जनरेशन का मकसद ये होता है कि LLMs जो आपको जवाब दे रहे हैं विदाउट रैग, वो जवाब दे रहे हैं बेस्ड ऑन द नॉलेज दैट दे हैव बीन ट्रेन्ड ऑन. सो जिस तरह मैंने थोड़ा सा एक्सप्लेन किया कि लैंग्वेज मॉडल जो है वो बेसिकली प्रोबेबिलिस्टिक मॉडल्स हैं. दे आर जस्ट जनरेटिंग टोकन्स बेस्ड ऑन योर क्वेश्चन. लेकिन जब वो प्रोबेबिलिस्टिक मॉडल कोई क्वेश्चन का आंसर दे रहा होता है तो वो अपनी ट्रेन्ड नॉलेज की बेस के ऊपर दे रहा होता है. रैग जो है रिट्रीवल ऑगमेंटेड जनरेशन, उस आंसर को फोकस कर देती है ऑन पर्टिकुलर डेटा दैट यू फीड इट. तो सिंपल अगर मैं आपको मिसाल दूं इसकी, आप अगर चैट जीपीटी का इंटरफेस खोलें और आप उससे किसी मेडिसिन के बारे में पूछना चाहते हैं कि मुझे इस मेडिसिन के बारे में बताएं, कैन आई टेक दिस फॉर दिस डिजीज और नॉट, और आप उस मेडिसिन की जो वो जो बुकलेट है छोटी सी जो उसके साथ होती है, वो आप साथ अटैच कर देते हैं इस क्वेश्चन में. नाउ दिस इज अ स्मॉल रैग पाइपलाइन कि पहले वो डॉक्यूमेंट से रिट्रीव करेगा इंफॉर्मेशन रेलिवेंट आपकी क्यूरी से, कैन आई यूज दिस मेडिसिन इन फीवर और नॉट. तो विद दिस क्वेश्चन इट इज गोइंग टू मैच दिस क्वेश्चन विद द प्रिस्क्रिप्शन दैट इज गिवन इन दैट डॉक्यूमेंट. वहां से रेलिवेंट टेक्स्ट के चंक्स उठा के लाएगा और एलएलएम को कहेगा कि ये क्वेश्चन है, ये चंक है, ये इंफॉर्मेशन है मेरे पास अवेलेबल, इसी में से जवाब बना के दो मुझे. डोंट यूज योर ओन बेस नॉलेज, गिव मी आंसर फॉर दिस पर्टिकुलर चंक सो दैट आई एम वेरी फोकस्ड ऑन दिस इंफॉर्मेशन जो कि मैंने लोड की है. सो जस्ट वो सारे यूज केसेस जहां पे आपकी डोमेन इंफॉर्मेशन सुपरसीड्स एलएलएम्स जनरल इंफॉर्मेशन. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, मैंने अगर आपकी कंपनी के बारे में सवाल करना है, मैं गूगल से पूछूंगा तो जेनेरिक बात बताएगा मुझे, लेकिन जब मैं आपसे पूछूंगा तो आप मुझे बड़ी स्पेसिफिक इंफॉर्मेशन बताएंगे बिकॉज यू आर वर्किंग, यू हैव दैट डोमेन नॉलेज. सो रैग को आप इसी तरह से समझ सकते हैं कि हम एलएलएम को अनेबल कर देते हैं कि वो कॉन्टेक्स्ट जो जहां से उसने जवाब देना है वो ग्लोबल नहीं है, अब वो बहुत ही फिक्सेटेड नैरो कॉन्टेक्स्ट है जिसमें से हम उसे कहते हैं कि जस्ट आंसर मी इन दिस फ्रॉम दिस पर्टिकुलर टेक्स्ट. जी.
Yes, we have another question. How has generative AI has changed the software development industry?
जी, सॉफ्टवेयर इंडस्ट्री को तो आई थिंक ऑलमोस्ट इट हैज एंड इट विल कीप ऑन चेंजिंग. व्हाई? बिकॉज वो हम कहते हैं कि अ फ्रेंड ऑफ माइंड यूज्ड टू से कि जो फ्यूचर के डेवलपर्स हैं, they will not be good in Python, they will not be good in Java, they will not be good in JavaScript, they will be good in English. Why? Because अगर आप इंग्लिश लैंग्वेज से ही कोड जनरेशन कर सकते हैं, सो आप लैंग्वेज एग्नोस्टिक होते जा रहे हैं. सो इफ यू इमेजिन इन फ्यूचर के आपने एक प्रोडक्ट बनानी है और यू जस्ट हैव टू descriptively define the roles and the task and the functionality of that particular product, and the code is generated by the generative AI model automatically. So it is going to radically shift the whole software development industry, not just that particular coding part. It is going to impact every stage of your software development life cycle. जब आप एनालिसिस कर रहे हैं, यूजर रिक्वायरमेंट जनरेट कर रहे हैं, यूजर रिक्वायरमेंट यूज केसेस को डॉक्यूमेंट कर रहे हैं, जनरेटिव एआई कैन इम्पैक्ट दैट होल प्रोसेस. हाउ टू आइडेंटिफाई यूज केसेस, वेदर दीज यूज केसेस मेरिट व्हाट यूजर रिक्वायर्स और नॉट. डेवलपमेंट के अंदर, एज आई हैव ऑलरेडी एक्सप्लेन्ड, जब आप टेस्ट केसेस बना रहे हैं, यू कैन ऑटोमेटिकली डेवलप अ पाइपलाइन जो कि आपके कोड से टेस्ट केसेस जनरेट कर दे यूजिंग जनरेटिव एआई. और जब आप उसकी डिप्लॉयमेंट कर रहे हैं तो यू कैन ऑटोमेट दीज टास्क एज वेल यूजिंग गाइड्स फ्रॉम जनरेटिव एआई. जिस तरह से अभी हम एजेंट बेस्ड मॉडलिंग की तरफ जा रहे हैं, एजेंटिक जनरेटिव एआई मॉडल्स की तरफ भी जा रहे हैं. So it's going to completely change how we code and how we do software development as a complete process.
Yes, similarly, we have another question. How does generative AI intelligence differ from narrow artificial intelligence?
Narrow artificial intelligence is focused on some particular domain, right? जिसका मतलब है कि वो किसी खास एक यूज केस के ऊपर ट्रेंड है मॉडल, लेकिन वो जेनेरिक उसके ऊपर या बहुत सी ज्यादा आप कहेंगे वाइड स्प्रेड उसके ऊपर नहीं कर रहा। इसका मतलब यह है कि नैरो एआई आपके जो सिस्टम्स हैं, जो सॉल्यूशंस हैं, वो उन यूज केसेस में दे विल कंटिन्यू टू बी यूज जो कि हाईली स्पेसिफिक हैं। तो फॉर एग्जांपल अगर मैं मिसाल दूं आपको स्टेट एक्सप्लोरेशन की, नासा की मिसाल दूं, अगर नासा कोई एआई सॉल्यूशन यूज कर रहा है फॉर इट्स ओन इंटरनल रॉकेट शिप, तो वहां पे ड्यू टू द paucity of computational power available, क्योंकि they don't have massive compute available on a rocket ship जो कि वो सैटेलाइट भेजते हैं, so they will still need a low compute intensive model that can perform that prediction or classification task. So generative AI जो है, it is based on the concept of scaling law. Scaling law, if you can study OpenAI का ही पेपर है, which form the basis of large language models, which means that the larger the size of the model, the better it is in its emerging abilities. Emerging abilities से मतलब है कि उसकी it appears to understand what you are trying to say. On the contrary, narrow artificial intelligence is very focused on some particular task. It understands those features, their relationships, and generates the outputs. Can we start generative AI learning without NLP? Yes, you can start generative AI, but I would recommend do have some basic concepts of embeddings. How embeddings are made, why they are generated, how are they used. तो जो आपके प्री प्रोसेसिंग के कुछ स्टेप्स हैं, टोकनाइजेशन, एम्बेडिंग जनरेशन, ये कॉन्सेप्ट जरूर ब्रश अप कर लें। अब बाकी यू कैन बिल्ड ऑन विद टाइम टू टाइम। जी, एनी अदर क्वेश्चन?
Yes, how can we address biasness factor of LLMs before their decolonization?
Before the
Decolonization.
So, जैसे मैंने एक्सप्लेन किया कि बायसनेस खत्म करने के, इफ आई अंडरस्टैंड द क्वेश्चन, या मैं उसको थोड़ा सा और इलैबोरेट कर देता हूँ कि बायसनेस खत्म कहाँ करनी है। पहला ये क्वेश्चन, बायसनेस खत्म ओपन एआई के अंदर करनी है या बायसनेस खत्म आपने अपने ओपन सोर्स मॉडल जो आप खुद होस्ट कर रहे हैं उसके ऊपर करनी है। सो अगर आपने ओपन सोर्स मॉडल के अंदर बायसनेस खत्म करनी है तो उसके लिए तो यू हैव टू हैव अ पाइपलाइन ऑफ रीइंफोर्समेंट लर्निंग दैट इज बेस्ड ऑन कि आप उसको खुद से गाइड करें कि विच क्वेश्चंस आर राइट और रॉन्ग। इफ यू आर फाइन ट्यूनिंग योर मॉडल बेस्ड ऑन एन ओपन सोर्स मॉडल, यू कैन फाइन ट्यून बेस्ड ऑन द डेटा। तो आप जब डेटा कलेक्ट कर रहे हैं तो आप उस डेटा के अंदर खुद से फिल्टर करें कि इट मेक श्योर दैट नो अनबायस्ड इंफॉर्मेशन इज गोइंग ड्यूरिंग द फाइन ट्यूनिंग साइकिल, एंड देन यू एड ऑन टू अ रीइंफोर्समेंट लर्निंग साइकिल। लेकिन अगर आप ओपन एआई की बात कर रहे हैं तो यस, यू कैन स्टिल ट्रेन एन ओपन एआई जीपीटी। आपके पास अगर उसकी एपीआई की एक्सेस है, बट अ वेरी हार्ड जॉब टू डू टू रिमूव बायसनेस फ्रॉम अ प्रोप्राइटरी सोर्स। लेकिन अगर आप खुद से ओपन सोर्स मॉडल के ऊपर जा रहे हैं तो यस, यू कैन फाइन ट्यून इट टू बी अनबायस्ड, यू कैन instruct it to be unbiased using reinforcement learning with a high probability. Of course, you can never be 100% guaranteed that it's not biased. G, any other question?
No, Sir Usman, this is it. Thank you so much for having us. Thank you so much for honoring us with your presence in this webinar. And we'll be starting our workshop. All the details for the workshop are available on the website as well. We will also be sharing the link. Dr. Naveen has also shared the link for the workshop. So this is it. Thank you so much.
G, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.